Hey everyone, this is SM Pratt, and it's time for the July 2021 Patreon exclusive Q&A video round 1. We'll do a quick recap for all the new Patreon members and get right into it. So this is going to be one of 2 Q&As each month. You ask your questions in the MMR video, so if you scroll up, you'll see a bunch of questions in the comments section. I just print out the first 50 for this video, and I'll do the second 50 for the second Q&A video. We have our normal lineup over here. We got the hot green tea. Of course, we have our sponsor. I think I have more in the canteen as well. So I think I got everything covered. We can go ahead and get started with Mertz. Mertz says, hey Scott, I've been consuming every piece of Pokemon related info I can get my hands on since I came back into the hobby about 6 months ago. And now I feel like I'm hitting a wall. I'm aware the gap between your level of knowledge and mine is monumental. However, I feel like I've built a solid enough foundation understanding that I can now build upon someone independently. How would you recommend I fine-tune and enhance the learning process other than an obvious answer of time and experience? Thanks. By the way, Mertz, I feel like you get in first page every time. Maybe you just have a name that I remember. Anyway, you have like notifications turned on. That's a really good question. I actually just made a public video that talks about time in the market versus timing the market. And yeah, ultimately the answer is time is very necessary to understand a lot of things in this hobby. You know, there are definitely legitimate shortcuts you could take, like being here, picking the brain of people who've been around, you know, seasoned collectors and, you know, engaging like you are. Those are definitely good moves to make, you know, but even for someone like me, let's just use me as the example. Like I've been here 15 years. I do this at a very, very, very high level. Like if anything, like have increased the level of intensity of like how you can collect things. And even with that said, it's like there's certain things I can't know without just waiting for them to develop or waiting for those patterns to emerge. And you'll hear me say it a lot in videos. Like I remember back in the day, like just looking back here when I talked about Roaring Skies, I'd be like, you know, this is uncharted territory with the new reprints. So we'll have to wait to see what happens because this is all new. So that's really the answer, unfortunately, is that time is very necessary. It sounds like you are just heavily engaged. You really just can't force, you know, that result or whatever it is, you know, you're trying to achieve there. Time is definitely a necessary part, even for like the top people in the game. So yeah, that is the unfortunate boring answer for your question, but it really is just time. And you'll see that play out. Like if you've been here, especially 4 years, for the people who've been here from 2016, like they're seeing a lot of what happened in 2016, but you'd only really be able to, you know, log that if you stayed the course for 5 years. So anyway, just trying to throw all that at you, but that's really the answer today is, you know, time is very necessary for everybody. Jen Montano, it's good to see you in here. Says, hey, SM Pratt. That's all I want to say. All right, we won't count that as one of the questions. Next up, Kenny Chen says, hey, Scott, how do you value rare low pop cards that don't have recent comps, specifically more rare Worlds Promo Staff cards and pop 5 or pop under 5? Okay. Yeah, you just don't have comps. I mean, that's really the answer. You know, comps actually, you know, tying in the earlier question from Mertz, like if you go back in the day, comps weren't a thing. You didn't have price data and things like that. Like you didn't even have complete listings, you know, over 5 years ago. Like that was a thing maybe 5 years-ish that we've had. And then of course, all these sites and metrics that we have now. So yeah, I really don't know what to say outside of I personally as a seller don't want to use a comp for something that limited. You know, I don't think it makes sense to just be like, oh, the last really rare card sold for this, so I'm just gonna, you know, price match that. This isn't like buying a TV at Amazon or Best Buy or whatever, you know, where you can just produce these indefinitely. You know, these are limited items. So yeah, I don't really know what to say outside of there just isn't one. And from someone who, if you're asking as someone who owns it, I typically just look at the last one as a data point, and I usually go a bit higher. And depending on like your patience and how much you need the money, you know, you can adjust that. But yeah, that there's really no answer because these items inherently are so rare, low quantity that you just won't get comps. RJ says, hey Scott, this is my first time in the Q&A, so I apologize if this has been talked about already. Do you think the Pokemon Company in the US will ever consider slimming down booster packs to 5-7 cards like they do in Japan? I'm sure others share the sentiment, but the amount of unnecessary bulk that's accumulated from English packs is absurd. I have to assume even folks who play the game avidly feel the same. I figured you have a little insight on this matter. Thanks so much. Keep up the good work. Yeah, that's an interesting take. So they did dial it down with the E series and then changed it. And I don't know if the answer is to dial down the quantity per pack or eliminate a lot of the excess chase cards, because I think that's the real answer there. I get what you're saying, because like in Japan you have less per pack, so therefore less excess in ratio to like your chase cards. But I think that's really the crux of it. You know, back in the day with WotC, it wasn't that big of a deal when you break a box, because you get like 70% of the set, you know, especially for like the smaller sets. But yeah, now because there's so many chase cards and variants, you're going to keep opening and ripping packs. Like ripping packs of complete sets today is just not possible unless you're like a huge store and you can buy this stuff at below retail and, you know, you have employees and everything. So yeah, it's somewhere between those 2 points. It's somewhere between like they need to either lower the chase card pool, or yeah, they could potentially cut some of the pack. I'd rather see the eliminate like the Lisa Frank hyper rares or something. You know, I'd rather see that go away. Maybe that'll help a bit. But yeah, I don't. Maybe it's just nostalgia talking. But I like when I open up WotC and there's 11 cards there. That might just be nostalgia because that's what I'm used to. So yeah, I think it's somewhere between those 2 points, basically what you said, and then also like decreasing the chase pool, because that's really the reason why you have so much excess. Alex Tab, what's up? Tab, recognize you from Discord, says, "Hey Scott, do you think the current grading backlog will ever come back to a reasonable pace? And will prices ever go back down? I always love encapsulating cards are sentimental to me, but it seems like nowadays not worth sending a card on $100 to get back within a year." Yeah, I think eventually it'll return to normal. I think there's going to be people, the thing that's really going to change it is a big burn. There's going to be people who get burned on some of the things they send in. I hear, one of the ideas I hear, and again, it's talking about time and patterns emerging. People are saying like, oh, the rates are going up, so that means PSA graded cards are going to go up with it. I don't think those are I don't think that's inherently tied. I think that rates can go up on cards and cards can still go down. So when that happens, when that happens, I think is when you'll start to see the decay of like the transient people who are sending, you know, to follow the leader, follow whatever thing it is to try and get quick money. When that starts to like decay a bit, I think you'll see that, you know, get back to normal, some type of normal. I think all of these companies are trying to add workers and scale to catch this demand. It's just demand. People really don't understand. Like the demand last year is something that not only was unprecedented, I don't know if we'll ever see it again. Like that uptick that quickly. So yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. There's so many industries that had the same thing going on. You can go down the line, supply chains, appliances, homes. There's so many things that had a similar reaction. So yeah, I don't know if what normal will be, but I agree that I think why bulk has always existed with PSA is because there's cards that just aren't worth more than $20, as we know, and you need to have that cheap option for them. And maybe a way they could do it is be more strict about what people send in, like keep them cheap. This is all hypothetical, but yeah, once that flippage really decays and that slows down and isn't as profitable for people, I think that'll calm down some of those like speculative submissions. But yeah, I don't think the prices are going to go down. They might run a special here and there. That might be your answer. I'd be surprised if they decrease prices, at least in the short term. Jack Hudson says, "Love the videos. I've recently begun getting into promos, unique releases, vending, dominoes, lottery. Just wanted to know what some of your favorites were." People ask me this all the time, and it's really hard to pick because you have stuff all the way from the original era till now that is exciting, like stamp promos coming out, the Scream promo. Go down the line, McDonald's, Pikachu. I can go all the way back. But yeah, Golden Era is really what I like the most. I'm the most nostalgic for it. Everything from 96, 2001. Like, I'm not exaggerating. Every promo, Japanese promo from 96, 2001, I enjoy it to some extent. Like, it's really hard for me to choose. But yeah, I mean, vending, Misaki, lottery, all of them. Game Boy, Not Awake, Koro, like, select all from 96, 2001. I just like all of them. I think some are even underrated considering, you know, other market aspects. But yeah, Japanese promos I think are like the most exciting thing to do. And sure, you could say bias, but it's just so exciting. Like it encapsulates everything about collecting. The release really brings to life the purpose. There's like a symbiotic thing going on there. And, you know, like you see it in a good set, basically. Like when a really good set comes out, it's like, oh yeah, there's an identity, there's a vibe to it. I feel like that's the majority of Japanese promos. Like they really hit that vibe and connect like the release with the card. Next up, Medisand says, "Hey Scott, if you have a high value card like 5K or more, is it better to put it in auction or let it sit on eBay? I have cards that never sell or take very long time unless I put them in auction. Any advice would help." I mean, I'd have to know the card. Typically, the general advice or general SM Prattism is something you could buy frequently, sell frequently. Something you can't buy frequently, don't sell frequently. So if you have an item that you only have one or two of and you doubt you'll be able to get it again, it's probably not good to dump it. But it's up to you. So yeah, definitely auctions are liquid. You're forcing liquidity by putting it in auction. Where if you keep it up, you're being patient. That's really it. Those are all the parameters right there. So yeah, it's one of those things that's more personal because I have a lot of cards that fit this description, and I don't care if they sell in a month, year, 2 years, 10 years. I don't care. So that's the thing is like it's all up to the person, the individual, how much you need that money. Is it more important to you to turn that into cash? There's a lot of questions there, but yeah, the general advice I can give you is anything you can buy frequently, it's easier to sell frequently. Anything you can't, you probably shouldn't sell as frequently. Tyson says, "Hey Scott, one thing I hear from different people involved in Pokemon, as well as other collectibles, is that for Pokemon to succeed and grow, it needs to have multiple generations of people. Do you think this is a high likelihood of happening? If yes, is there any concrete data information to back it up, other than the fact that Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise? One thing that worries me is that kids aren't as excited about Pokemon as I'm assuming it's actually their parents who have most of the interest. I have no real insight into this, however. Thanks for the valuable information and conversation you bring every 10 days. Really appreciate it." Yeah, so data on that is not going to be like, okay, here's how many, kids or whatever, but I can throw a lot of anecdotal information at you that I think is relevant and a good perspective. So there's people like on E4 who are 10 years younger than me, and I don't see any difference in how they collect versus me. They just happen to be younger than me. They like EX era. I like WotC, or that time frame. I know people even younger than that who grew up with like Heart Gold, Soul Silver, or pick your poison, any line there in the sand. So what I'm getting at is that cyclical process already exists, and Pokemon's very lucky to have it. A lot of other collectibles don't. Sports, I would say, doesn't as much as Pokemon. So part of your other question, we were saying like you don't know if it's just parents. Kids are absolutely into Pokemon today. Like I have so many friends, family that are teachers who still do the same things back in the 90s where they confiscate the cards. That's all they talk about. I get like the peripheral text from like a family member like, "Hey, my friend's son had these cards, just want to know what they're worth." Or like this kid who's like 4 says like there's 6 Charizards and they want to know, are there 6 versions of Charizard? This is like all the same thing we were doing back in the day. So it's definitely doing very well. That's why Pokemon being younger than pretty much every other thing on that list of highest grossing media franchise, the reason why it accelerated so quickly is partly because of that process. Like each generation has that experience like we did. The only difference is like they grew up with Gen 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. But it's very common. And it's great because it ties people together. Like, oh, you like whatever it is, like Urshifu or whatever Pokemon is, like you can figure some common ground there because it's so similar. So yeah, that's definitely happening. And it's a big reason why Pokemon's so successful is because that process is in motion. Next up, Thane says, "Hey Scott, would you consider uploading your weekly public videos to Patreon as well with YouTube ads? I like to listen to them during my commute, and it really helped if they were ad free. Without the ads. Thanks as always." So unfortunately, my life is so busy and my schedule is so tight to the point where I can't even take like a weekend off vacation. I'm not exaggerating. So people ask me this type of stuff all the time. Could you do like podcasts? Could you do whatever? I'm at a point where like I try to record if I get a video done 2 days before it goes up, like that's a win for me. Like that's how like tight things are. So yeah, unfortunately that's not something I could do. YouTube is still a branch of who I am. It's not my full-time thing. And maybe that'll change way down the road. Who knows? But I love doing Patreon and try to put more into Patreon. That might be the answer, is that more things might funnel to Patreon. But yeah, unfortunately, it's just a time issue. It's like, that's not something I could do and when I'm saying something I could do, I wouldn't be able to consistently do it. That's what I mean by that, is I wouldn't be able to consistently hit that. I would slip up and forget, and I just don't want to do that. That would go against, like, I like being consistent. That's part of who I am and, my success or whatever. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a time constraint. If there were any way that I could just be bought, if someone bought me out, maybe I could just put all my time and energy into making content. But until that potential like once in a blue moon thing happens, yeah, that's just how it's gonna have to remain. Next up, Michael says, "Hey Scott, with PSA's massive backlog and the increasing pressure that puts on the company and its employees, do you think that a few months or years down the line we'll have a big expose of toxic work culture at an established grading company? Do you think that one of the reasons some submissions are taking so long is because they're upholding good, healthy work conditions? Would love to hear your thoughts." Yeah, I never thought of that. I feel like grading companies are such a niche thing that it's not, when people like pontificate about the Amazon workplace or whatever, I don't think it's ever going to be something like that because it doesn't have to be as competitive. The demands, like, they have more demand than they can handle right now, than they can literally process. So I doubt that would happen. When my experience of like going to PSA in person, like being at their office, you'd be surprised how lax it is. Like, it's not this corporate environment, that you imagine. So yeah, I really don't think that you see this like expose of a toxic work culture. You might hear people say like, yeah, the compensation could be better or something like that. But yeah, I doubt you would see that because again, it's a niche market. It's not as competitive. It's more about training people and doing, fitting these molds and just staying the course and trying to adapt to demand. So yeah, it's not. I would be very surprised. Maybe the pay thing. I could see the pay thing as one of the complaints. All right, next up, Ulysses says, "Hey Scott, thanks for answering my question last month. It's helped a lot. I'm curious, what do you think is missing when it comes to creating content around Pokemon?" Oh, that's good. That's a good question. Not necessarily what you get the most likes, shares, but what do you think is lacking? Yeah, that's a really good question. I think right now there's a lot of the same. When I see someone cross post something on Discord Refor, I'm like I can't even remember the names of the content creators anymore because they're all doing such a similar thing. It's different when there's someone like who's PokeChloe, the girl, like the recent girl / meme on Discord. She's a good example of someone who I think is doing that like normal routine but very well, and she's definitely using her natural beauty or whatever you want to call it, to like leverage that market, because I think that's the only thing you can do right now. Everything is a dime a dozen in that like mainstream pack opening type thing, but I think the real ingredients, if you're going to go down that road, is to be like a calm, well polished, easy to access thing. I'm not as much that. I'm the weirdest one. Like, I'm Mewtwo in the cave. I don't think what I'm doing is really replicable, and I think what's come from what I'm doing is like the talking thing, and I see more of that, and maybe more of that could expand a bit. But I think the problem you get into with that is like you get into now the drama stuff. That's a whole new thing that's emerging that I really just don't like at all. I think it's an absolute zero gain, 100% loss scenario. There's no gain to it. But I do think like the PokeChloes are the like future content creators where you have a mix of like normalizing the hobby, if that makes sense, doing that pack opening thing and not freaking out. Maybe I'm biased because I don't like the freak out thing. Like, I just like people, like, more organic presentation. I feel like that's the answer for the mainstream dime a dozen road. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. Maybe more people talking about like what they like, throwing a little more information in there, maybe a little more story discussion, maybe a mix of those things. Maybe if I edit my videos, I could be that. But yeah, it's really tough because there's so much content out there right now. But I feel like it's definitely saturated. There's a lot of the same thing happening, and maybe a mixture of those two, like a meeting of the minds. Like, I could probably take a little bit from the mainstream side to help myself, and vice versa. Like, they could take some from the mainstream, could take some from the serious side, and you could probably get something a little more unique or exciting there. But yeah, really good question. That's something I could just ramble on about forever. So yeah, that's what I have just off the cuff. That's what I could think of. Next up, Steven says, "Hey Scott, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as to why we've always seen a greater availability of Skyridge 10s on eBay and a greater pop than Aquapolis and Expedition, despite Wisdom in the Hobby says the first two sets were printed much more than Skyridge. Also, do you think things like nostalgia will be less relevant as the hobby grows and matures and new people enter and things like art and Power Report become the driving values?" Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, nostalgia is always an easy sell, and it's because it's part of you. You know, it's your experience. It's definitely over described. I think overused. People say nostalgia is like the only reason why people collect sometimes, which is crazy. But yeah, I think nostalgia is definitely a big motivator that's hard to detach from this stuff. Like a good example, one of my friends at hockey, I bought his binder collection back in the day. And it was actually surprisingly decent. You know, for someone who just casually collected, it was decent. And he was telling me like, yeah, I used to cut grass and I'd go straight to the card store and buy Pokemon packs, cut grass, buy packs. And he said one time he bought 2 base packs, pulled a Charizard and a Blastoise. I'm like, dude, this is like gold. Like if this is like the best. That's like an Ace King. Like that's the top thing you can get. But my point is, he doesn't have any nostalgia today for that. So it doesn't connect him. So you got to always have nostalgia in there to some degree. I do agree, though, that it's overused. It's definitely like some people go crazy with it and they're like, oh, I didn't grow up with those cards. I can't read Japanese cards. That's like the other side, the other extreme where people are just, that's too much. But as for the question about Skyridge, they all were probably printed in a similar quantity. I think Skyridge just gets a lot of attention because out of those three, it's naturally going to be the crowd pleaser. It's got Charizard. It's big. It was like going out with a bang. It was the last WotC set. It's got things going on. Kind of like Neo Destiny. Neo Destiny gets more attention than like Neo Discovery because of the contents. Like last old design WotC set too. So yeah, I think that's really what it is. I think it's a popularity thing more than like an actual print quantity. I think that's more the answer there. Daddy Nat says, hey Scott, new Patreon member here. Love your work, dude. My question is, what do you think about the PSA 9 Misaki promos? Their pop is significantly higher than PSA 10s. I've heard they'd issued somewhere between 30 to 40K of each promo. So I'm curious if you think PSA 9 pop report will inflate a lot more over time, or are the higher grades more protected due to the fact that Misaki promos are hard AF to grade? Lastly, what do you make of PSA 9 OC promos? I recently purchased a PSA 9 OC Misaki Machamp, which is one of the 3 in the pop report, and I was significantly cheaper than regular PSA 9. But the pop is much smaller. I know condition is not really a true indicator of rarity, but still seems to stand out in the crowd. I'm now considering going after PSA 9 OCs with other promos. Thanks, Nate. N-A-T. I don't know how you pronounce it. Very good question. PSA 9 Misakis are definitely the high bell curve for a mint example, a non-Misaki marked example. So that's why it's higher. The 9OC, what it's supposed to mean traditionally is your card would have been a gem example if it wasn't OC. And how it works in sports is that if you have like a 9OC, that usually is like a -2 condition. I don't know why. Like the qualifiers in sports are looked heavily down upon. Where in Pokemon, there's people like you might be one of them being born right now in front of us who likes to collect those qualifiers. But traditionally in sports, they don't like qualifiers. I've had Gretzky rookies, Marcel Dion rookies. I've had vintage cards, a lot of vintage stuff that has an OC that people just don't really care about. They'll go for a 7 and 7/8 OC. Like that's what they'll do. So in Pokemon, sometimes it goes the other way. There's people who really want to get all a 9 OC first edition base set. That's a thing, So yeah, it's an interesting one. There's people who just like low pops. Pokemon collectors are a different breed. We're built different. So yeah, it's one of those where it can go either way. I'm just giving you context from sports. Pokemon is still very new, but in some cases, people value the qualifier more. I personally am not big on the qualifier, but I could take it or leave it. I'm indifferent on it. If I personally like to just choose the round number, even decimal points. I don't like decimal points. If I get 8.5, give me an 8. I'm dead serious. If I get a 7.5, give me a 7. Like dead serious. Like that's just me. And it's just a preference at the end of the day. But yeah, so my point is that's my preference, but it doesn't represent the whole market. There's other people who really like decimals. There's other people who like qualifiers. So just try to throw it all at you. It's something that definitely exists out there. As far as release goes on Misaki, yeah, that's always been the advertised distribution. I doubt we'll ever see, that total amount. Josh B says, hey Scott, hope the bladder is holding up this month. As you know, for those of us suffering in the sperm of the Magikarp Pokemon market that is the UK, we're not only struggle with much smaller buyer seller pool, but also tough time with Her Majesty slaps us with hefty import taxes. Do you network with UK-based TCG sellers? And if so, what inside struggles feedback do you get regarding the UK market? How the more successful members of the UK community adapt to challenging conditions? All right, that's a really good question. So UK and Euro really blends into one thing for me. Australia is similar, but Australia I feel like has more flexibility. They're more in line with the US. There's like a smaller market. But anyway, yeah, the thing I notice overall, the short answer here is that most people I know in the EU or UK hustle hard. Like the guys who do like the actual business and do this full time, they hustle hard. Like every person that comes to mind that I've met over the past decade plus, like they hustle. Like they're selling every little card, flipping every little thing. And that's because their margins are less. Where here you can like chill out in the grandma house and relax and not have to sell for like a decade and you'd be fine because your margins are better here because of what you've highlighted. I've never paid import duties. I don't even know what that means. You know, there's a lot of benefits of just being in America for business. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you. There's no shortcut outside of effort. And all I could say is a lot of the guys in the EU, they basically just hustle hard. Like every single one of them goes hard. There's no like easy answer. There's nothing I could say like, oh, they have a magic distributor relationship. You know, that's not a thing. Like they just have to put more effort into it, have to do more volume because of the margin shortage, you know, the limited margin there. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you. The only thing I could say here is like the more these markets grow, the more they can operate within themselves. And I see a lot of that. I do see a lot of premiums on certain products like the Euro premium where it's like you could pay 2 or 3K more for like, let's say a WotC box that normally would cost you the same, if not a little more to import it. So I see that happening and maybe that's a game to play over there. Like Evolutions was like that for a while in Germany where you could get this premium on it if you had it in Germany. So, you know, maybe that's the name of the game there is to try to find those items you can isolate in your regional community. But again, you know, these are very, very sharp tactics that take a lot of experience and things to pull off. So yeah, there's unfortunately no like magic bullet answer there. John Devine says, greetings, Mr. Pratt. I heard Rudy talk about phenomenon magic where the price of a given box increases independent of the EV of the box the older it gets. It seems the more time passes, the less people care about EV. I was wondering if there's any correlation in Pokemon. Do old vintage boxes life or their own independent of their EV, or do they still stay somewhat tied? Thanks for the insight, John. Yeah, very good question. Something that's been discussed before because EV could be its own thing right now. Like I remember one time talking about this on E4 recently and how like the grading backlog really adjusts EV. It just obscures EV even further because usually you just do like, okay, card, contents, box, done, like a quick simple maths. But now it's gotten so cumbersome that it's hard to even calculate EV. So anyway, yeah, that's something that doesn't need to exist. What I would say is when you really start to have that huge stratified difference, I think that's when I'm like, yeah, I'm good. You know, like a lot of the EX era was like this for a while. It's gotten better because the EX like reverse hollows and because I think the EX reverse hollows are like some of the best, if not the best reverse hollow ever made, because it just looks like a hollow. Those cards have come up a bit in value, or the EX cards in general have come up, so that's closed the gap. But for a while there, like I'd always use Deoxys as the poster child. It'd be such a wide gap there, like what you could pull versus what the box was. Where a lot of the WotC stuff is closer, like even first edition base. First edition base is eerily close. You know, if anything, for a long time, and even maybe today still, you can crack one and make your money back and profit, you know. So yeah, they're still tied. I would say the point I would get at, for me at least, is that the market is still pretty healthy in my opinion in relation to how close they are. I don't see too many of them stratified. I think when they get too far away, you know, they become separate entities. Like the box becomes its own thing. You know, there's people who just want the box. There's people who just want the packs. They don't want to open them. Maybe they want to flip them, raffle them, who knows. But the bottom line is yeah, they are separate things at the end of the day. They can be connected. I think a lot of sets are still very connected. I think it's just a natural human way to deduce value, to be like, hey, what's in this box? Should I pay $1,000 if I'm only going to potentially hit $100? You know, I think it's just a natural human thought process that can occur. But again, markets are diverse. Some people are just like, I want the box. Like, that's it. Give me the box. So yeah, you take it all into consideration, but ultimately I think Pokemon is definitely closer. The gaps are closer, for EV than I know some Magic boxes that are like to the moon and the contents are, dog water. So we're not as stratified yet. There's definitely some examples in Pokemon, but most I think are still pretty healthy overall. Leo says, hey Scott, I was wondering your thoughts on the 98 Please Trade promo with the holoback. PSA 10 versions of this card are still relatively affordable, $1,200, $2,000, but it seems to me this checks all the boxes of fundamentals, and in addition is exceptionally scarce. Maybe I'm wrong. How does something like this stay low while the trophy illustrator reach great heights? Well, first off, the gap between Please Trade and the like Trophy Peak as an illustrator, like, I don't even know. Like, that's like when Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about the universe expanding, like that's where the illustrator is. And the Please Trades are maybe around Mars or something around there. So while I agree, I think the trade promo does fly under the radar. I think the Hollow Batgirl definitely flies under the radar, but it's got more quantity than I think people realize. I'd put it kind of in a grand party arena. It's tough because this is never going to be something where it's like, we got 10,000 of them. We got, 15. We'll never know for sure. But yeah, you don't see as many mint copies. I can echo that right now as I'm making this video. I don't see as many mint copies as I used to. So yeah, I agree. The AP ratio is a little bit off. I think and I always analyze this for my own inventory, especially, this is actually a really good example of something I'd look at and be like, if this is going for $1,000, I'm good. Because I can't get a lot of it. If I can go get 5 or 10 of them, okay, yeah, I'll start selling $1,000, but I can't do that, so yeah, I agree in that sense. But yeah, it's not even in the trophy tier. And I don't know really where to place it. It'd be cool if we could like have a range like S, A, B, C, D, all the way to F, like the Shining Fates or whatever, like whatever, top to bottom tiers and where to rate all of them. But yeah, I don't think it's one that's like hugely underrated. I do think it does fly under the radar a bit. There's plenty of people who know about it, but the thing I would isolate is that it is definitely not easy right now to find mint ungraded copies. So yeah, that's the thing that I've noticed personally on my end. Rave says, hey Scott, I tried your coconut water and it's actually pretty good. So thanks. I would love to hear your thoughts on pre-release Charizard or versus other Sword and Shield Charizards. I feel like they're underrated because English Modern is so saturated and police kits never get reprinted. Thanks. I have to take a drink when it's mentioned. Yeah, that's a pretty good observation there. Yeah, the pre-release Zards are definitely more limited. It's tough to say how many are in total out there, but they're certainly more limited than a set card. I mean, the easiest way, what was that one? Champion's Path. Remember when Champion's Path had its like moment for a week or whatever it was? Champion's Path now, I think, is the Champion's Path Charizard, I think, is the most graded, if not one of the top 10 most graded Pokemon cards, and it's what, a couple years old? So that right there, I think, tells you the amount printed for these new sets. And of course, that you can adjust pull rates and things like that. It's not just Champion's Path Charizard, but that's just one data point of like how these sets are printed now. So yeah, I think that's a good observation. But of course, things aren't based on just one variable. Like I have rare cards that are rarer than the illustrator, but that doesn't mean it's going to earn as much as the illustrator. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's a good observation. Maybe with time, that decay thing I was talking about with PSA earlier, I think if more people get burned on a lot of these cards where they just don't realize that they're buying at a high of something that has hundreds of thousands of copies printed or whatever, they're going to start looking towards rarity or something that just won't sink as much. So, maybe if more of that trend grows naturally from people being burnt, yeah, maybe you'll see a little bit more focus on it. But I honestly am not too bullish on the pre-release Charizards. They're just okay to me. I think they're meant for like, and I don't mean this as an insult, just trying to categorize like more casual collectors, modern collectors. I think that's the wheelhouse. But again, if some of those people get burnt on like the Champion's Path or whatever it is, they'll be like, all right, I'm gonna buy something that's actually rare. So, maybe that's the opportunity there. And Tango says, hey Scott, what are your thoughts on WotC Air cards? It is more niche of a market and some of the cards have slightly retraced. Since there's a wide range of WotC Airs, for example, we can dig deeper into Jungle No Symbol. In my opinion, there is a nice aspect of having no symbol, similar to Base Unlimited, and the pop number grade is lower than first edition, but it looks like there's less of a retrace here. There weren't a lot of sales during the Logan Paul boom. In some cases, Gen Mint 10 sell close to the same price as the first edition counterpart, if not more. Jolteon, yeah, I know who's buying that Jolteon. Would love to understand what your take on them is. Also, not to get off topic, but would love current thoughts on No Rarity as well. Thanks in advance. I'm drinking in reverse here. Yeah, I think WotC Airs specifically are the most interesting to me because they have the most history. I'm not trying to like denounce other airs. I just think that when you go back to the originals, it's like, whoa, this is like the Wartortle Air, Ninetales Air, Diglett Air, you know, these are like the OGs. So yeah, I think that I get the most excited about them. Maybe I'm partial because of nostalgia, but they're just like the most pronounced as well. Like they're just like there it is, you know. There's no like ink blot, all that weird stuff, you know. There's too many one-offs now. I feel like there's too many like print, like not even print, like bad cuts, or you know, these like one-off airs. I like the WotC stuff because it's so consistent, you know. It just has everything going on. Yeah, as for Jungle No Symbol is another good example. It's just a demand thing. That's really it. There's a lot more people on the path of I want the first edition set of WotC. I want the whatever, even unlimited set of WotC. No Symbol is definitely a niche. It's a good niche, decent niche, but it still is niche. As for No Rarity Base, I have mixed feelings. I think it's decent, but cost of capital is too much for me. It's just too much. I think there's a lot of new guys in there, similar to the people in Top Sun. No Rarity is nowhere in the same conversation as Top Sun. There's no misinformation with No Rarity. All the information you have is accurate. But the thing that is similar with both of these is that those same guys who are getting into Top Sun because it's the first, there's a lot of guys doing that with No Rarity. I don't know how much of it is like sports cross-collector speculation versus like guys who really want the cards. I'm not trying to downsell them, upsell them, or anything. Just trying to be as accurate as possible because I see more of that cross-collecting in there focused on money rather than focused on like guys like, for example, like a Shizzle Me Timbers or someone like an E4 veteran who, you know, he's the guy who really like broke the case or dropped the file on No Rarity. Like people like that who just like are enamored with the history. You know, for me, that's like pure organic interest. So yeah, it's always going to be the first no matter what. Like no matter what I say, it's always going to be the first set. But it just doesn't do it for me because like first edition base, I just prefer over No Rarity. I grew up with it. It has more inertia. It has more history. The lack of intentionality, that's the thing that always bugs me about No Rarity. It's not intentional and it's not proprietary. Those two things bother me. I don't think they intentionally did what they did. If anything, I think it's mainly okay, we're figuring it out. Here we go. And we're going to, you know, retroactively throw in the rarity, retroactively adjust these things. I don't think they intentionally did it that way because you didn't have it for any subsequent set, and also the lack of proprietary physically, of like just lacking a symbol. You know, you get that on a lot of cards for multiple reasons, promos, deck variants, you know, things like that. So that's always been my pet peeve from a collecting aesthetic perspective. But, you know, the history is through the roof, and that's its strong suit. But that's my whole, like, that's all of it right there. That's pretty much everything I have to say about it, I guess, that I can think of, you know, off the cuff. Excuse me. Shohan says, hey, Scott, a new Patreon member. My question is, I just saw a Fade TMB trainer in original case sell for 450,000 yen. Or 450,000 yen. Okay, I was like, whoa. On Yahoo auction, and that's way less than I thought. Why does fading make such an insane difference? I mean, it's a great buy opportunity if you wanted that card, because you're not going to get that price any other way. So yeah, I mean, it's just a preference. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's just a preference. That's what that person or those people are willing to pay in that moment. I wouldn't read too much into it beyond that because you know what the card is, you know what fundamentals it has, and yeah, you know, that was a good opportunity. Whoever won that card, congratulations. Like, you got it at a price that you probably won't be able to get ever again. So yeah, I think the only thing I can add there is that people who are like, I don't like faded, 90% of people say that, first of all, can't afford it. They can't afford a non-faded copy. That's not a shot. That's just math. Like 90% of them cannot afford an unfaded copy. Moreover, you don't have the luxury like with an unlimited Charizard, even first edition Charizard, where these things are always up and available, and you could sit there and window shop and be like, I don't know. Do I feel like plaid today? You don't get to do that. Like, it's just, are you going to win or not? So yeah, that's the only pro tip I can give to people, is that those type of cards are one-way road. There's no going back, unless the whole market goes down, because they're the top. So all the market has to go underwater for those to go underwater. That's how you got to think of it. So yeah, that's all I can say about that. Congratulations, whoever won it. HTWA says, SM Pratt would be really good question. What would be a really good question to ask you? Could you answer that, please? Thanks. This is like the most big brain and smooth brain question ever. I don't know. I don't know what meaning of life. I don't know. What's the meaning of life? And if I can answer it, to try. Effort creates meaning. I don't know. I don't know what the. That's a tough one there. Next up, Dawn says, "Hey, SM Pratt, longtime viewer, new on Patreon. Thanks for the price extension. Now I get 3 more videos per month. Yeah, glad you guys like it. Seriously, thank you. We're still going. You're a treasure to the community. When the border opens, I'm going to be moving to Japan as a missionary, and I'm gonna try and buy a bunch of Japanese exclusives, new releases and old. I'm good at budgeting, but I'm very new to business in general. What's your take on selling from Japan versus sending them home and selling in the US? And if you have any advice on the idea of buying in Japan in general, thanks. I'm curious, after WotC, what are your other favorite eras? Mine is EX. So very nice there, Dawn, for all those compliments. I actually did a call recently with a longer patron. He's been in Patreon for a while now. And he actually has access to Japan, like it sounds like what you will as well, in person. That's a huge asset. That's a very, very unique opportunity that you have. 90+ % of people do not have the ability to go to Japan, walk into a store, buy the item at bottom price. Like, there's no lower price for new promos than what you're buying in the store, unless like ton of flippers like want to suffocate themselves. You just go in there and you can buy the card. Like, that's phenomenal, and that's a huge opportunity. Now for selling, yeah, selling in the US is the best option, like bar none. So if you have a way to do that, if you have a way to buy and then maybe come home sell, buy, come home sell, that'd be the way to go. Now, it doesn't mean like it's all or nothing. Like, Japan definitely has a market, very strong market. You could sell there as well. The problem I have today, especially with the Amazon Prime conditioning, is that people want things fast. I even noticed for myself with my Japanese boxes, for example, I sold 2 cases of this in 1 hour. And I think my ending price was $150 per box. And obviously this is a good set. It doesn't have enough quantity right now, so that's part of the equation. But you gotta understand, that's like almost double what they go for in Japan. So my point is that the US is the biggest selling market. It's the best place to do it. So it's a tough one to tell you. Like, you can generate sales there. Maybe just both is the answer. Maybe Porcano Los Dos is the answer. So anyway, that's why I have just understand that's a unique opportunity. A lot of people would kill to have that. I'd love to be able to buy all this stuff from the ground floor. If I could live in Japan even partially, I would just pay people to go to stores and I'd go myself and pay other people to go to these stores and buy these promos. It'd be worth it. Honestly, now saying this out loud, it'd be worth for me just to take a ticket, go there for a month, get all these people, pay these people beforehand, buy it all up, man. There's a lot of Patreon value here, and then go over there and physically get it, because like be physically there is a huge perk. So definitely reap that. As for favorite set eras, WotC's the top one for sure. I don't know. Yeah, EX was fun. EX is when I got back into it. EX was the new stuff. That's how long I've been around. Like, I remember when I started buying again, I'd buy those 3-pack blisters at Target, and EX were the new cards, and it was cool to see, like, whoa, these Pokemon have so much power, so much HP. So yeah, those are probably my 2 eras, because the WotC's what I grew up with, and EX is the new stuff. It still is the new stuff, and always will be. Mondu says, hello, new member, love the content, really great value, really impressed how you do all these in one take. Read the Millionaire Next Door. that you suggested. It was great. Wondering if you'd consider yourself a new car prone dealer loyalist, new car prone dealer shopper. Oh, okay. Used car prone dealer lawyers or used car pro dealer shopper. Thank you. Yeah, so I was the used car. I don't even remember the exact loyalist. Okay. I do now. So I was the used car loyalist. But now I recently bought a Tesla. So that doesn't apply anymore. But yeah, I'm still well within that range. I don't like to spend even a significant amount of my net worth on things. You know, like the Tesla, for example, I would buy that because the ratio of where I am is far enough apart. I wouldn't even buy a Tesla. Like if I only had 100,000 cash, I wouldn't buy it. So, and even that is better than a lot of people. You know, I've seen these YouTubers who are like, all right, what's the minimum you need to buy a card like that? So, yeah, I don't know if you want this deep of an answer, but I used to drive like a Prius for a long time. I used to really focus on value. I'm not a big car person. I don't drive that often either. You know, maybe to hockey and post office here and there, maybe visiting family, friends, the once in a blue moon road trip. So I don't put a lot of mileage on my cars. So yeah, it's even this Tesla, it'll probably last me 10 years at least. So that's just how I am. Like I'm that type of guy. So yeah, whatever that is, I forget which one. I have to reread that book. I haven't read it in a while. I forget where that puts me, but it's definitely on the fiscal side. You know, even though it is, I guess Tesla is a luxury car at the end of the day, but the ratios are correct. Like I wouldn't have bought that 5 years ago. I wouldn't have bought it definitely 10 years ago. So yeah, it's all about the ratios. And I think that's what the Millionaire Next Door was highlighting. Miguel says, hey Scott, I tried Vita Coco and discovered I really do not like coconut. My question is, do you feel that we're heading into another tough... Oh, heading through. Sorry, it was a typo. There was no H there. Heading through in Pokemon where there will be a period of opportunity and slow growth. The comparison I'm looking towards is a block between the end of XY, Sun and Moon, the tag team cards. Oh, yeah, okay. Actually, I recognize your name, Miguel. I think we talked before. So, oh yeah, you should try like the pineapple one. I know that one tastes better. I seriously need to message Vita Coco and get some free product here. Yeah, you're highlighting that same cyclical thing from 2016-17. I do agree there's some similarities. Now, I don't think, as of yet, we're going to have that off the cliff saturation. We haven't reached that yet. We've definitely come down. The interesting thing is, I remember when everyone was like pontificating about Vivid Voltage, Shining Fates. People are quitting. People are leaving, you know. Look at those prices now. They've already cooled down very quickly. Very quickly. And not in like a huge, like, Roaring Skies was like an absolute dive bomb without a parachute. Where these weren't. These were a lot more calm. They were a lot more calm. They just turned down the water a little bit. We're like, all right, let's just turn down the hot water a little bit. So with Roaring Skies, they just shut off the hot water. They're like, nope, like no more. Like we're just going to saturate the market. It's going to suck. No one's going to be excited. So yeah, I hope we don't go back to that. I do see the similarity in the up and down, but I don't see it as dramatic. That's my big answer there. Noah says, Scott, if you're alone in a desert with just enough resources to survive in your Pokemon collection, you could get off the island by burning your favorite card. Would you do it? Damn. Why do you gotta ask these questions? Yeah, of course I gotta do it. I mean, I'd have to vet. I mean, if it's something like the Voltorb vending, I can get another one. So, yeah, I'd have to do it. It would suck, but I'd have to do it. Creative says, hey, SM Pratt, what's your opinion on adding grading company, or CGC in particular, that grades stolen cards? Do you think companies need to verify how cards were obtained to authenticate them, or should they only be concerned with if the card is fake or not? Thanks. Yeah, I don't like how companies do the stolen card inadvertent release. Why it happens is because collectibles at large, Pokemon in particular, is not a mainstream iPhone, type thing where, you know, when you have theft in those type of markets, it's treated differently. Where Pokemon, people are just like, who cares? That's the majority of what you're going to hear is who cares. So that's why it happens the way it does. I personally don't like it. I think the problem I have with this, without stepping over the line of information that I know that I won't say until I exit the hobby, there are cards out there that the stories about them are complete bullshit. Like top to bottom, absolute bullshit. Like nothing that was said about them. It was said, things that were said to make money. Things that were said were intentionally said to mislead. And it's just completely inaccurate information. However, if the basis is only grading the physical properties of the card, the problem I have is when you encapsulate that, you also simultaneously legitimize those incorrect stories. And that's what I don't like about it. So whether it's a legal release, premature release, a card that shouldn't have been printed, things like that, you know, I do think it should be treated with a little bit more severity and seriousness. I think it's one of those examples where people need to calm down their collecting like thirst and understand that there have been people who've been broken, lied to. I know people who are dead now because of bad deals on bad information. So it's usually people who just don't know behind the curtain that are optimistic about it, which I guess is a lot of things in life. But unfortunately, I know the people who spread the misinformation. I know people who work for Pokemon and consciously took cards and said, oh, there's only this amount of them, when that's patently false. And, you know, that information spread like wildfire, and every open mouth YouTuber regurgitates it because they don't know any better. And encapsulating those cards also encapsulates the story. So I don't like that. That's just my take on it. And again, it's because I have so much knowledge. Probably only a handful of other people have that knowledge, you know, of how many of X card was actually produced, how it was actually, you know, described by members of the company and things like that. So that's why I'm not big on that stuff. It's just risk. I don't like it. And, you know, if you want to collect it, that's up to you. That's just my opinion. But that's why I don't like it, is because, again, it legitimizes things that aren't verifiable. And whenever you are the source who isn't, like, what I love about trophy cards or event cards, even Worlds promos, things like that, there's an event that you could publicly address it to and be like, oh, yeah, it was given out here, it's given out there. We can objectively verify that. But when an employee is like, hey, I got this card, it's because of this, whatever, and they reap all the benefits, absolutely not. You know, and again, in other industries, the SEC would be all over that. But because it's collectibles of Pokemon, nobody cares. So that's why I don't like it. Hopefully that makes sense. Next up, Jake says, Raspberry Pi, what makes the EX Air more popular than DP? I personally enjoy DP more, but the market doesn't seem to care about my feelings and agree with me. What does EX Air have, not including gold stars, that DP doesn't? Do you see the demand for EX always being higher? Similar to how WotC will always have more demand. Thanks for your answer in advance. So I hate to burst your bubble here, but yeah, EX has got a lot more going on than DP. DP was definitely a downgrade from EX. So EX, as I mentioned earlier, just naturally has the best reverse holos because they just look like holos. They have EX cards, the first era to have EX cards. Moreover, that idea of EX cards is echoed throughout, you know, even in the form of Level X and Diamond and Pearl, and then back again to EX later on. And here we are today with GX or V cards. It's another iteration of that concept of like this super card. That's what EX was. And yeah, I mean, if you're going to exclude gold stars, you can't because it's part of the era. So, you know, that's why. They was just a good era. Like, there's no other way to say it. Another thing to throw in there is that not only was it creative, you also had the super scarce element. Now, DP was part of that too. DP was part of that low tide era, but it just wasn't as creative. I was around then when these sets were new. I was around before the DP era even existed, and it just wasn't as exciting. I wanted it to be more exciting, but it wasn't. Now, some of them, like, what was it, Secret Treasure? What was the one with, like, Ho-Oh, Charizard, Blastoise? Why can't I think of it? Like, it'll come to me eventually. But that set was exciting for me. I was like, oh, these holos are cool. They pop. They kind of look like the old stuff a little bit. Nice mixture. But overall, EX, it has gold stars. Like, you can't just erase those from existence. And what I mentioned about EX cards, I think that's the reasons why it is more popular. And with that said, it's still not as popular as WotC. I doubt it ever will be. Next up, Lane says, hey, Scott, what are your thoughts on Digimon? The card quality from Bandai seems to be better than most modern English promos in Pokemon. The problem I had was I got one secret rare from each of the 2 booster packs I opened. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really mess with Digimon that much. One of my longtime Patreon guys is like a big player in Digimon right now. It's so far it sounds good. It kind of gives me like Final Fantasy vibes when they popped off, but only time can tell. And yeah, I don't know. I don't even know like if you're saying that, maybe it's just anecdotal, but if the poll rates are that high, you just want to have something in the middle. You don't want to have too much where it's like a secret rare in every other pack. You don't want to have too few like Fortnite. Fortnite is the biggest, like absolute biggest racket I've ever heard. It's like modern sports. I think it's actually done by Panini if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, those are both sides of the spectrum for me, where it's like 1 out of 300 and 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 2 for like the top secret rare. So yeah, that's all I could add. But again, I don't really mess with Digimon. I don't have time to get into like the super niche things because I have so many things with Pokemon that I can't even address. So yeah, that's my like with much experience I have take on it. Paris says, "Hey, what are your thoughts on the PokePark promos? They seem to be really cheap for having unique art, unique release, especially the Forest File and Kanaka Ao's art really hits home in the forest. Yeah, for sure. Paris, student of animals with no magical powers. Yeah, I agree. I think the Forest File, when you said PokePark, that's the first thing that came to mind for me. It's always been the one I like the most. I think both have their own place, but the Forest one's the strongest, and I do agree overall. I think it does fly under the radar. You know, that's a really easy one to answer. That's pretty much everything I have for it. Sam says, "Hey Scott, with PSA being closed, turnaround times being over a year, and grading prices only going up, I realize the value of the cards already being graded. At the same time, thousands of cards are being auctioned with PMCC. Seems like a lot of people are selling their submissions when they get them back. For a lot of older Japanese cards, this is causing the prices of already graded cards to fall while the process of grading continues to become more complicated and expensive. Do you think the cards selling for less or equal to $20 plus raw are undervalued, or there are just too many cards still coming back at $10 under the $10 tier? Additionally, do you think these cards will adjust their backlog of $10 card submissions?" Very good question. Very complicated. This goes back to earlier when I mentioned how people were like, yeah, the fees are going up PSA, so the prices have to go up, right? No, this is not true. You can have cards that go underneath the fees. We saw it in 2017. There are plenty of examples of PSA 9 WotC Holos that were much better, much cheaper than going out there and throwing your old rod into the ocean, pulling out a raw card and grading it yourself. So I've seen it. It's happened. It can happen again. I think it's happening right now for certain items, and it'll probably happen for more items. People really don't understand how easy it is to grade, and they really don't understand the value of data on how many people are grading. Since I do have a little bit of insight on that, why I caution and tell people a long time ago now with the K-shaped recovery is because people just don't understand. The average Joe today is so basic and average. Like, there's so many of them. There's so many basic Pokemon out there now. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how to address this overall outside of saying that, yeah, I think there's certain cards that are definitely going to go underneath the price. Maybe one thing to add to help answer this, I do think that you might see a change in the ground floor, where like Japan has always been the ground floor because they have the lowest cost, lowest barrier to entry. You might see a change in that with some of these graded cards, too many of them going at once. You'll see them dip a bit, and they might go below what like Japanese buy lists have or something like that. So yeah, that'll be the interesting trend that I think might emerge down the road. Matthew says, "Hey Scott, to finally reach a point where Japanese established itself as superior language in the hobby, it seems like more and more awareness is being generated for Japanese cards to the point where many old back Japanese holos are now on par, if not more valuable than English Unlimited WotC. Surely you noticed this. Plus, I think the general consensus is that modern Japanese is simply better than English. I don't find myself buying English anymore. Has the tide turned for good?" Yeah, for some people it has. I think it goes back to being burnt. I think some people are tired of being burnt by the same thing over and over. As for the old stuff, I said this before. I think it was actually Winters or someone asked in another Q&A about if unlimited English and Japanese were identical quantity, would they act the same? And my answer was no. Japanese would act better because there's not as much flippage, at least as it stands. Japanese market is more consistent. There's not as much of an up and down tide. It has a consistent tide. So therefore, even if you have similar to exact quantity, which I don't think you do, I think Japanese has less for the old stuff. Therefore, their market is more stable. You don't have as much up and down volatility. So yeah, I think that's the answer for that. And I think as for people transitioning, I think it goes back to being burned. People don't want to be burned. You can't rely. The problem with modern English and why it's become, in my opinion, the most toxic category in the hobby, doesn't mean it's all bad. It just has the highest toxicities because it's the easiest to enter. There's no barrier. Everyone, their dog can do it. So what that means is you have a lot of people who just simply don't know what they're doing. And I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean it as they're just very new and they don't understand. They're just brand new. Where when you have barriers to entry, naturally you have to, think it physically. You have to climb that. You have to get over that. You have to put more effort to get to that place. So I think that's why, again, it reinforces that steady tide you have in Japan where English is so volatile because everyone, their dog can do it right now. And I think that volatility is going to burn. More people are going to be buffeted by the waves of that volatility than on the other end. Acquire the Shire says, over 30 billion Pokemon cards printed. That's a lot of cardboard. How many more trees do we need to cut down to make Pokemon real? I will personally hyper beam the entire Amazon rainforest. If that's what it takes. I want to hang out with Wooper Quagsire. Damn it. Oh my god. You can see the contrast here. People who use their question for something serious, and then the Discord leaking into Patreon. Phil says, would you be interested to hear your thoughts on the release dates? As Japan always releases prior to Western sets, do you believe Pokemon will eventually shift to an adjusted international release, slow Western demand for Japanese sets? It's always going to be this way, most likely, because this is a Japanese franchise. Why I said the thing about they cook the meal is because they own the IP. It's theirs. They do it first. US, figures it out afterwards, reheats the meal. So I think it's always going to be that way. It's always been that way. According to history, it's probably going to repeat itself. So I don't see an incentive for them to change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah, that's all there really is. I mean, that's just how it's always been. And again, because Japan does it first, and then English. I don't even know if English can legally change the setup that they have. I don't know the legalese behind the scenes, but yeah, it's been that way for 25 years, and I just don't see it changing. Chris says, question about Play Umbreon Espeon isn't exclusive art since it has an English print. Even though Japanese is first print, reprint being the reason you said you don't really care for the cards, but wouldn't the Unicarp be in the same boat? Or even further extent, they did the same thing and put the Unicarp art on web, which is released after Unicarp and easily affordable. Excuse me. Only difference is the e-reader design on the card and knowledge, which I feel makes the web card, and I feel those cards much more similar to each other. Comparing it with Gold Star to Umbreon, oh man, it's a lot. Espeon, which have a stark difference, including a silver border, most of it hollow. Genuinely curious on your opinion, would explain why you feel the Unicarp is different and why you are bullish on it when it's essentially not exclusive art, which is the reason why you said you're hard to play Espeon Umbreon. Okay, there's a lot there. Number one, exclusive art is just one variable of many. And the thing with Unicarp you gotta understand is Unicarp came out in 1998. From a very specific event that was all about that event, the Tamamushi event. Not only did you have a card, you had a pin, you had a pencil, you had a little notebook. You also could get the Magikarp in your game, the new Dragon Rage, and that Magikarp was tied into the card. It's all solidified in that release. The web release 3 years later was a compilation release that was very impulsive. There's no real rhyme or reason for why they did it. And I think they did it mainly because they wanted to test like this online thing. There was a lot of experimental things going on with the E-Series, and that's why they did it. They just plopped it in there impulsively. So what I'm getting at is the University Magikarp original card is the entire captured, purposeful thing that happened. Espeon Play and Gold Star English equivalent were just set to come out at the same time. If anything, why you have the releases the way you do. Like if you go look at the pop releases at the same time, it's just what's his name asked Phil about the release timing. What I'm getting at is they weren't as intentional. you didn't have like, okay, these were only exclusive, like if you look at Power Keepers, you have the previous 3 play promos in there. That's just how they were released. What I'm getting at is like the original play promos were not, if anything, the Mew is better naturally because it is exclusive. Where I get what you're saying about the Unicarp, that the art isn't as exclusive, but you got to understand that original ties in that actual purposeful event. Where Players Club wasn't as pointed. As much as I love Players Club, and much as I love all those cards, it wasn't as pointed. And now the thing I always say about those is not that I'm not trying to say they're bad or anything. Obviously the market on them is doing really well. It's not that it's either or. It's not black or white. I'm just trying to highlight the nuance between those two. But what I always say about those is that cost of capital, I'd rather get something with unique art. That's what I would rather do. That's just me personally. And if you want to erase Unicarp, that's fine. It's like I still would go for something like Tropical Wind or something like that, because that's just my preference. And I'm just someone who likes that. But it doesn't mean it's the only thing. Like there's plenty of cards that don't have unique art that do well. A lot of the LP promo era, a lot of it's reprinted in English for a fraction of the price, and those hold prices and do well on their own. So it's not a binary. I'm just trying to really explain the nuance there of the two. Like there's definitely a strong difference between what Unicarp is and what even the Players promos are. And I don't even think the Players promo are that big of an offender of like reused art as some of the things you mentioned. But there's definitely a strong difference there between those two, and hopefully that explains it a bit. Prussia says, "Hey Scott, first time I asked a question. What do you think about the World Championship deck promos with the silver border and signature and special backs?" When I got back in Pokemon last year, I looked at my collection, noticed I had a lot of them. I remember thinking as a kid they were very cool, and since I didn't have a lot of rare cards, they were what I use in decks like Mew EX, Blastoise. Man, I remember when these were new. Some of my first sales with these cards, by the way. I still think they have a unique look. Thank you for all the information and entertainment you give about Pokemon. Hope you have a great day. Yeah, I think they've definitely stood the test of time. Back in the day, they weren't as desirable. I don't think they are as desirable as the standard card. Even for myself, I'd rather take the actual card, like the one it's based off of. It's a classic reprint situation. But anyway, yeah, I think they've stood the test of time. I think they're more than fine. Even back then, when they were some of my first sales, they sold back then. Back in like 2009 or something, like way back, when I decided to start selling on eBay. So, yeah, I think they're fine. I think they fit a role. I think you highlighted one of the main roles that they fill. They're a cheaper option. They give you the art. It's one of those moments in time where they tried something. It works, but yeah, I think it is still a reprint in the end of the day, and it's not going to be the main preference. Young Bambino says, greetings, Scott. What would you say you're most proud of as far as your contribution to the hobby? E4, YouTube, perhaps Patreon, or maybe something else that will continue to live on, even when you decide to move on. Just curious if you ever ponder your legacy. Also, you will be at the Sports Card National in Chicago. Maybe we could do a little E4 meetup. Take care, Kyle. Yeah, that's going to be a game time decision. I thought about going to CollectorCon. It's tough right now. I had a person, here's some Patreon juice. I had a person offer $4,000 compensation, free flight, pay for all flights, room, all that stuff, just to go evaluate their collection. Right? Decent deal, right? Don't have enough time to do it. So that's just like where I am right now. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do more like in-person meetups and, just hang out with people. And, it's always, you can't replicate like just chilling with people. Yeah, I don't know for legacy. I honestly don't think about that much. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe YouTube, Patreon, because that's like explicitly me. I hope people value me for. I doubt myself more than what I think people realize. I always don't think it's enough. So maybe that's why I don't think about it, because I don't think I've done enough. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. I don't think about what the legacy will be. Maybe when I get there, I'll have a better answer. Corn Cobb says, "Hey Scott, thanks for the great content. I have 2 questions. What are your thoughts on Uyama Pikachu? And what are your thoughts on the English Gold Star versus Japanese in terms of difficulty to grade, value? Again, thanks for the content. Cheers." 2 very easy ones. Uyama Pikachu, yes. Very easy. Really good card. Top to bottom. Gold Stars, Japanese, I think is rare, but less demand. So it kind of balances it out. But I'm interested to see how that plays out long term. I think the AP ratio on some of those has been off for a long time. If anything, they were my poster child for AP ratio when I talked about that idea. So yeah, I think the Japanese ones, I think, have more potential, especially on the lower end, because I think there's a lot of English gold stars out there. Go look at the Pop Report. Pop Report's crazy for some of the English gold stars. You also don't have like the weird gold star dog thing in Japan. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think that again, Japan is rare, but the demand is lower, so it kind of balances out. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that looks like in a few years. Caught at Point says, hey Scott, on a pre-optimized releases, Celebi 175, Charizard 143, Eevee Heroes, all had higher pre-order prices than what they are available for today. I was thinking about what Pokemon will look like in 10 plus years. I feel like that has potential to outpace much of sports. Pokemon is much more global than sports, and the average person in Pokemon is younger. Therefore, I would expect more money to funnel into Pokemon than in sports over the coming years, particularly as developing economics grow. Probably ties into what Jonah Dex said on Pokemon still being too young, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. Also, could you please play the most metal version of Gerudo Valley? Thanks. That's actually what I played by loop pedal for my classical guitar. That's one of the songs I play. Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm actually on the fence for a lot of the new releases because I'm waiting. I think I mentioned that in the last video, how I'm waiting to see if the pre-optimized pre-order price is going to hold. So yeah, you're right. I do see that happening. I think that a lot of it is showing the demand for that stuff and how like only certain people, like everybody in here has very detailed, specific knowledge of the market. Where there's a lot of people like Pokemon that couldn't even tell you what Yahoo Japan is. They couldn't even tell you what Bai is, right? So that I think that's what that reflects. A lot of just people who just want that card, they don't really care. I think that's what that reflects. Also, as for your question or your statement about sports overtaking it, yeah, I think Pokemon has actually overtaken Magic already. And for when I started doing videos, that wasn't true. Magic was definitely above Pokemon. I don't think that's true anymore. I think Pokemon's definitely overtaken it, especially when you look at a lot of the mid-range stuff. There's no gold star. I say this all the time. There's no gold star equivalent for Magic. That era of Magic, what is it? Like after Urza's, like tell me what was going on in the mid 2000s that even holds a candle to the EX era. Forget about that. Let's go right now, 1-to-1. What holds a candle to what's going on in modern Pokemon from Japanese promos, especially like the ones you listed? There's nothing close to it. So, and even the highest to high end, like, yeah, you get those esoteric, like, one of one, like, oh, the art, which I don't think the art's equivalent to anything in Pokemon, because if the base set Charizard art went for sale, I don't even know what that thing would earn. Like, I don't even know what that would earn. That would be a bloodbath. So what I'm getting at is, you already see it increasing in a way that you wouldn't have 5 years ago. And I could see that continuing into sports and competing with sports. The thing with sports that's interesting is you have so much classical institutional investing going on. There's so many people in there, from lawyers to investment bankers and institutions, like the highest, like the biggest commodities trader buys, this stuff. That's the level you have, with sports. So that's the only thing I could see being a contender there. But who knows? On other sectors, I think Pokemon is already doing better, like modern Japanese promos. I don't know anything equivalent to modern Japanese promos in any other hobby. I don't know anything as special, as fun, as profitable in a lot of cases as modern Japanese promos. I think it's a very unique thing that Pokemon has that other markets just don't. So yeah, there's a lot to say there. There's a lot to always talk about there. And again, it's always changing because 2016, Magic was higher, where now I think Pokemon has taken that. Jake says, hey Scott, what are your thoughts on CGC, PSA 85 and 9 EX, Japanese EX Holos and EX cards? I've been collecting these for a while in raw state, and often they turn up in disappointing condition through Yahoo. With PSA 10 starting to command a solid price, sorry, I'm just skimming, 8.5s and 9s still seem really cheap. I picked up a few of these for 50 to 80. Which isn't far off the cost to grade. With raw, okay, you're highlighting the AP ratio all over again. For those who don't know, AP ratio is availability price ratio. So what that means is, like back in the day in 2017, when you could go buy a PSA 9 Jumpluff first edition for $30, and then if I go out and throw my old rod into the raw ocean of cards and pull out a jump bluff for 15 or 20 bucks plus grading fees, it has to be at least a 9, otherwise I'm in the red. Okay? That's what AP ratio means, is the availability price ratio is off. When the graded card is the bird in the hand final form is cheaper than trying to process yourself, that means it's incongruent. Because it should be like this. Like, you should have the graded card here and the work risk ratio here, because there should be some type of opportunity here if you're risking buying that ungraded item, doing the work. That is how you should look at it. There should be some type of value there. But when these are the same, that's bad. You don't want to, to me, this is usually a buying opportunity, when the final form is better. So that's basically what you're highlighting here, is that like these 9s are getting to a point where they are like, I'm just reading a question to myself. They're getting to a point where the AP ratio just doesn't make sense. It's one of those situations where, again, when the final form is the best option to buy, that's probably a sign you're in a buyer's market. Now, does that mean it's going to go up? Does that mean you even bought at the bottom? No. But that does mean that, yes, that the current market availability that you're in right now, the final form is the best option. What you've highlighted here with especially $50. If you get a $50 PSA 9 EX card, yeah, to me, that doesn't make sense. As a seller, I would never sell those at $50. That doesn't make any sense. Even some of the ones I have on eBay right now that I should probably price check after thinking about it, I should probably raise the price on, because those cards aren't, like you said, they're not available in mint condition. They just are not. And maybe, I'm not saying you can't find them at all. They aren't just consistently available in mint condition. So yeah, another AP ratio scenario. All right, Matthew says, thank you for the videos. You open my eyes to 97 card ass and I've fallen in love with it. I'm trying to collect a full set. Do you have any videos you recommend, or which set out to look for vintage items in terms of condition? Because I always struggle with this, especially looking at sets like 97 card ass. Yeah, 97 cards is tough for condition because it's flimsier. The chipping is more abundant. I just sent in a bunch of them that I thought would do like 7 to 9, and like the high results were 7. I had some like 5s and 6s. I'm like, man, like card ass is not easy to grade, especially now. No surprise, 24-year-old set. But yeah, there's no real way. Maybe I could do a video on like the gradability of it. If it in the long list of videos I need to do. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Just in the question response here. Outside of, those cards are hard to grade. I have like a near mint full set, even with the checklists I have in storage that I saw the other day. And I'm like, should I grade this? Should I even bother? Right now, I'm just going to let it sit, because I just don't know what the point would be. So anyway, card ass is tough to grade. Flimsier card stock, prone to chipping. There's tough to grade. This is it. Pee-wee0 says, hey Scott, long-time lurker, first-time commenter. My question is regarding sending in multiple cards PSA. What are your thoughts on sending in multiple high-end first edition WotC cards together in one grade, or split them up into multiple orders? What I'm worried is that PSA limits the amount of PSA 10s for each order, population control, and also the potential astronomical declared value fees. I'd lean more towards the latter there. If you're worried about the declared value fees or whatever, pop control is an absolute conspiracy. PSA does not care about the one of millions of Pokemon cards and tens of millions of cards, whatever, however many millions of cards are going through their hands in a year now. Like, they don't have time to sit here and be like, oh, let me go look up the pop report on the Blossom or like the Wobbuffet. They don't have time for that. So yeah, it's more about the fees, and that's up to you. If you just can't force a card to be a 10 if it's not a 10. Like, that's just the answer at the end of the day. Like, there's just cards that just won't ever get a 9 or 10 or whatever it is. So yeah, I would probably mitigate your risks if you're worried about the fees, if they potentially could be a high grade. Yeah, maybe send in a couple orders. Multiple orders tends to be better when you have numerous cards as well, because you're basically allowing not only like this case of splitting your costs, but also you might get some cards back before others rather than having it all in one bucket. So yeah, that's all I can tell you. Otherwise, it's just a preference at the end of the day. Don't listen to a lot of the conspiracies out there. A lot of talk, a lot of noise. Fees are a real thing. You got to make that call at the end of the day. But yeah, again, spreading in multiples mitigates. David says, hey Scott, I was wondering if you could talk about victory medals. I really like them and they're more affordable trophy. I actually just purchased a PSA 8 victory medal from your last auction. Oh, congrats. But where do you usually stand against other trophies when it comes to rarity? Also, what's the difference between the stamped and non-stamped versions? Would you consider them to have better fundamentals than most set cards? Thanks for time to answer. I really value your knowledge. Down to the last drink here. Down to the reserves. Okay, so yeah, overall, I do think they're better than set cards. Even if you have the same quantity, which I don't think a lot of them do, but let's just say they have the same quantity as whatever set that came out back then. They have an individuality to them. They can just be a set. You could just set them right here. They look great. You know, they look nice as like a little office piece, a little display piece. You can do multiple together. They work together. They're very dynamic. They can work in a binder together. You can do a mini set of them together. Victory medals are just good cards. They're just another one of those Japanese promo staples. They're just good. Also, I like the little subtleties of like how the 05, 6, 7 era, that art is like the Pika Ring era, like a super, super rare trophy. So I like that. I like how there's their moment in time. They're thoughtful. They're made for an event. They're actually given out to winners or participants. They have some story to them. They have some life to them. But yeah, they're not as rare. You know, like the Pika Ring is a great example. You have like the same exact art style going on for both of them, but the Pika Ring's way up there as far as rarity is concerned. And the victory medals are definitely like 5 notches down. But that's okay because they fill what they're supposed to do. They fill the role that they're supposed to play. So yeah, I do think they're better. Again, even if they have the same quantity as set cards, I think they're more interesting. I think they're better individually to display. And for the stamp part, yeah, I think it was 06 had that one stamp. That one doesn't appear as much as the unstamped in my experience. But, you know, you're not talking night or day premiums here, but that's just my anecdotal experience on it. Francis says, hey Scott, the new PSA president recently mentioned in an interview that they were planning on eventually implementing the inner PSA sleeves in the cases. What are your thoughts on that potential change? Oh man, yeah, that's tough. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know. I don't know. You have it for some already. I'm trying to see on my sloppy desk over here if I have. Actually, I think I see one. This is day in the life. Is there a sleeve in here? I think on some of the card-ass ones, there's a sleeve. I can't tell. It's definitely like obscured. There's like a warp going on. Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I don't like with sleeves is you lose clarity. That might be a hot topic. People might not like that. But like when I do my binders, the cheaper cards, you lose the clarity. Like when you do those binders, like on videos, without a doubt, putting a sleeve on there decreases the clarity. So that every action in life pretty much has a cost, and that's the cost of a sleeve. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. If it preserves it better, maybe. I just don't know. I don't know if that's the answer. I would rather just have, if I know the PSA case preserves, I think humidity is really the only issue. And if they do that enough, like if there's no difference between the sleeve, I think I'd prefer it without the sleeve. But then again, I don't know. Some people don't, they think over time, you know, card shaking, like erosion basically on the edges. I really don't know. That's one where I don't have a strong opinion either way. All I can identify is the clarity is definitely something you lose when you do add a sleeve. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I have to think about it. Maybe if it added, what's the thing called? UV resistant. Maybe if it did that, that'd be more of a perk. I'd be like, okay, all right. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I prefer more clarity, I guess is what I'm saying, because I feel like the case protects the card. That's a tough one. I really have to think. I'm like picking pedals here back and forth. I'm like, do I like it? Do I hate it? Do I like it? Do I hate it? Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one. I can see both sides, I guess, is my answer. Nelson says, hey Scott, thanks a lot for the video. I'd like to ask about the SM Pratism set cards is always another copy. Or you said there's always a better one. So I see set cards is always another copy. Well, I understand this rule of thumb and not to be an end-all thing. I'd like to know what this applies to specifically to sets Skyridge and Versus. I don't think I need to speak at length on why I consider Skyridge special, limited print, end of an era, beautiful art. On the other hand, Versus has the mysticism, at least for me, does for me too, of being a Japanese exclusive, super strong identity. Yeah, for sure. And being maybe still underrated. Please let me know what your thoughts are on how these sets might differ from others. And there's any others out there you consider kind of bend the rule or not adapt completely to it. Okay, good question, Nelson. I'm actually noticing a couple here where people are like taking something I've said and wanting me to elaborate on it, like kind of with the play promo one too, where some of these statements I make, there's a lot of like nuance behind it and context. So the context of what I mean by set cards is always another copy, is in relation to the card itself, not the grade, not the pedigree, not the if Aoki signed it or whoever. I'm not talking about any qualifier. I'm talking about the card. And you can extend that even for a majority of the cards in a high grade. Of course, you have your exceptions like the Slow Kings, T17s, all Neo Genesis for some reason. Lugia is piled on. You have your exceptions there. But what I'm getting at is that what the point of that statement is just to highlight that set cards are printed nationwide to satisfy demand as a retail product. There's a reason why in 1 year alone, we've seen more boxes opened and discovered and sold and flipped and ripped and dipped than probably the previous 3 years, And that's always my point, is that there's always another copy. That's all it means. It just means I'm not saying it's PSA 10 or PSA 1. And I think people just need to hear that, because I think one of the hard things to do, and I'm guilty of it myself, is that I'll see the card and I see the little star at the bottom, like, oh, that's rare, right? It's a rare card. And it's like, what's that actually mean? I think a lot of people just regurgitated, oh, that's rare. And it's like, yeah, the declared rarity for the set is rare, but it's not actually rare. So anyway, that's what that means. As for Versus, 100%, it's beautiful. Top to bottom. I love the Versus set. I think for me, Versus is like new back vending. That's what I usually call it. Vending to me was a home run set. Very detailed, very thoughtful, very unique. I think it was really tough. Vending's so unique because it was in the 90s. And they did so much in there. Because you got to remember, this was the 90s. And I adore base set. Every day I come in here, got to bend the knee to base set because I love base set. It's the first base Jungle Fossils, the first, right? It's the original. But when you compare vending art to that, it's night and day. Same with Versus. Versus was very unique. I love how they did like the artists for each one or whatever. Very unique. So anyway, yeah, that's what I have for the Versus set. I think it is. You could call it underrated. I don't know if it's like grossly underrated or mildly underrated, but yeah, I agree with that observation. Matt Malik says, hey, Scott, this is probably something you don't need to consider, but can you give me your thoughts on promoted listings on eBay? With higher end and rare cards, I'm sure it's practically meaningless. However, for small sellers and cards, they have greater competition. Do you think the fee is worth it to get more views? Yeah, it can be. A lot of my stuff that's actually showing up as promoted listings is done by eBay automatically. Like, they're just pumping my big stuff, and I think it's because it gets high traffic. So, like, yeah, we're going to promote it, or without even asking. Like, I don't even do that on my own. Like, they just, like my Illustrator, Pika's, Trophy Kangaskhan, that stuff, they just promote it all on its own. I don't notice difference. Those items, I don't think it matters. Maybe for stuff like that's really competitive, yeah, I can give you the edge. But I'm a bad reference because I don't really use that. Like, I don't really use the promoted listings personally. eBay does it automatically for me. So yeah, I don't know. I could see it working for like the first edition base or like the WotC cards or, something like that. But otherwise, I really don't know. Next up, Kyle says, hey, Scott, boy, do you open Pandora's box for mentioning an adult beverage Q&A last month? I hope one day we get the Q&A out of you until the virtual cheers. Last month, there were a lot of questions on card ads, but what are your thoughts on the vending series and its optimization? Also, do you have any info on its supply, how its supply compares to other early Japanese WotC sets? Thank you for all the knowledge and time put in these monthly videos. Much appreciated. Okay, so maybe the next one will be an adult Q&A. I'm like still getting over, you hear that mild cough come up every now and then. I've got like the T virus or something. I don't know what's going on. It's not COVID, I know that for sure. But yeah, maybe when I get through that, we'll do something. But yeah, as for vending, glad it came up again. Can never talk enough about vending. Man, vending is one of those sets where I don't think it's super rare. It's become more scarce lately. I think that's fair to say. Used to see a lot more of like completed vending, sheets and all that. So you don't see as much of it as you used to. I think what I would say is that I don't see as much of the vending supply that I did before. I feel like even a year, 2 years, 5 years ago, especially, I could buy vending all day, usually mint condition, sheets if I wanted it, multiple Japanese sellers selling complete, unpeeled sets of it. I don't see as much of that today. What I think is interesting is that how it was released was unique. So you can get like one sheet, if that makes sense, or like one 4 card, 3 card thing, rather than like, I guess that's a pack. If we're gonna make a comparison to standard sets, so it has a different identity. I don't know what it is in relation to like Japanese base, fossil, pick your poison. I really don't know how to give that metric. All I can tell you is just that now it's not as easy to find mint vending than it was a year, 2 years, 5 years ago, and especially the sealed stuff. I see a lot less of the unpeeled sheets, especially complete sheets. I used to see complete sets all the time on eBay. I don't see as much of that anymore. So I don't know. I don't know what the precipice is, how far we are to that. The tough thing with Japan, like I mentioned earlier, is that they are very calm and, the tide isn't as crazy there. So it's tough to gauge, is this going to be the new standard? Will there be more supply come in? Who knows? But yeah, that's all I could say for comparing it to other sets. It's definitely harder to find today than it's been in the past few years. All right, next up, Tim says, "Hey, Scott, I was wondering how integral you see folks like yourself, knowledgeable, vocal, high capital collectors, to the health and growth of the hobby. And I'm sure many others, see you as a bastion of Pokemon cards, similar to how Buffett and Munger are perceived with Berkshire." Well, that's a huge compliment. I'm not sure if anyone with both a huge collection and respected voice, ever left the hobby before, but are there other examples from sports cards, comics that we can learn from? Thanks. Actually, that's a really good, outside of the flattery, that's a very good question, Tim. With all that recent Gary drama, which I thought was despicable, I hate seeing that type of stuff. One of the potential outcomes, if that trend continues or if that culture grows in Pokemon, is that the big players will become more private. And you don't want that. One of the things that makes Pokemon really nice, and I think more accessible, friendly, etc., is that the top people are all there. They're all there. Like, I'm here, even if you came in here $50, like, I know it's impossible because it's me saying it, but it's like you're literally getting access to the top of the hobby. Like, if I could pay $50 to talk to the guy who owns the Astros, that owns like the top Mickey Mantle cards, the guy who owns another sports teams that owns like the top Honus Wagner cards, like, where's that dude's Patreon that I can get into? I think that's the thing people really don't understand, is that in these older hobbies, the big players are not as present. You see one or two maybe, but majority of these guys not only are not as present, but the data is not as public. It's all very tight-knit, competitive, close to their chest. Where in Pokemon, you have guys, especially on E4 alone. Look at the data on E4. Look at the resources available there. And it's just from people sharing. It's just from people who are passionate about something. And they're like, hey, I like this thing. Here's this information. Here's this guide. It's unbelievable what's out there for Pokemon. So that's all I can really say, is that, people, the big players in Pokemon are all there and accessible, where in older hobbies, they aren't. Coins, who knows? They're ghosts. Art, they're all ghosts. Sports, a lot of them are ghosts. You definitely have like the Nat Turners and people like that, but they're public for a reason, because they're trying to be public to, for what they're doing. And I think that, yeah, Pokemon's very spoiled. You have a lot of access. Most of it's free. Some of it you pay a fee, a nominal fee. And it's a very, very different market than sports, art, and all the other older hobbies out there. Even when you're thrown in the Goliaths like Buffett and Charlie Munger, like, these guys are absolute, like, S tier. They're the top. So yeah, imagine that. Like, if I could pay $50 to pick their brains, I would love to do that. I'd pay $5,000 to ask them a question. I think those guys are even pretty accessible for what they do. Charlie Munger just sits up there and like smirks and then throws out some little quip or some sarcastic comment. But yeah, I mean, that's the real thing I can tell you, is that sports is a lot more tight-knit, private, close to their chest. All the other older hobbies and markets are like that. Pokemon is very accessible. And my prediction is, it's kind of a cynical one, but I think it's real, is that the more you have like this drama, hateful, immature stuff out there in the ethos, the less incentive you have for those people to share. And you already see it happening. You know, I don't share private sales rarely ever. I don't even share private offers rarely ever. You know, because I remember seeing, even on E4, which I think E4 is like a good, more mature side of the hobby, you would still see those like crybabies come in there and be like, oh, this is, I remember the Trophy Kangaskhan, perfect example. $80,000 at PSA 10. And then it's like, I forget how many months later I sold a PSA 9 for 100,000, you know, it paid overnight to a Patreon member. So it's just like, that's the thing I think that's tough. You know, you see those little microcosms, like people chirping, and the immaturity makes people become more private. And I just don't want to see that happen more. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But those are my thoughts on it. Those are my like impressions on it. That, yeah, I think it's important to have like the experts there and accessible and helping, you know, in some way, and being tied into the market. Because without that, I think you have chaos. I think you have a bunch of chickens with their heads cut off, like that, you know, people that will take a lot longer to learn, a lot more misinformation. But anyway, that's what I have. We can talk about this forever. I need to move on. We got like 4 more questions here. This next one is like a whole story. Brandon says, you know, hydrate before we get into this one. BFTIEDT from Discord E4. Hey Scott, I've been trying to really hone my skills in terms of knowledge, how to read the market. While I first got back into collecting last fall, I would always go for the hot ticket item. I've gotten away from that and have really tried to understand the market, how it works, and where and when I can apply that knowledge to buy value when I see it. I mainly focus on Japanese promo cards now. I've noticed while searching for screen promos as well as play promos that something is off. For example, play promo Mew PSA 10 is over 1K, and 9 somewhere between 400 and 600, give or take. A Raw is anywhere from 300 to 400. The gap between 9 and 10 seems normal, but the gap between 9 and Raw seems off. Either A, Raw is currently overvalued, B, PSA 9 is undervalued, C, the mixture of A and B. My gut tells me C, and I'd love to know if there's any advice. Tips on methods you use to try and figure out which, in a market situation like above. My goal is to be able to see and figure out my own without blowing up Patreon comments. Appreciate the time. Thanks. Again, another very good example of the AP ratio. That one's not as extreme. That one's not too bad. But again, availability price. That's what we're talking about here. The AP ratio is just something that I coined. It's one of the many things I use to determine value of an item. And that's a good example of it right there. That thought process of comparing the 10 to the 9 to the Raw. That's what I think a lot of us do naturally. But I think the step 2 that a lot of people don't go to is like, okay, even the 7 and 8s are like the same as Raw. You know, for something like Players Mew, it's rare than like your average set stuff, or at least more unique. And yeah, I think that you've highlighted the exact problem. The 10 and 9, I think, is pretty healthy. I don't think the Raw is too bad there. I think only being a couple hundred off in that context isn't that bad. I don't really think that's a huge offender. But yeah, I do agree that there might be... Here's a good way to contextualize it. If the 9 continues to sell and you see a little more depreciation, which I wouldn't be surprised, of course, this is me going out on a limb, but I'm sure there's going to be more of them in the PWCC merry-go-round for the next few months. And if you see that depreciate a bit more, I definitely think the 9 is increasing its value. Ironically, the price is going down, the value is increasing. There you go. That's a counterintuitive idea. But yeah, I think that's a healthy way to look at it. I definitely don't buy as much Players Club Ungraded from Japan right now because of what you just highlighted. A lot of the price premiums, AP ratio again. One of the examples I use for this is back in the day, Japanese Gold Stars, let's say, were like $200 ungraded. PSA 10 versions of some of those were $200. So it's like, you see the obvious point. Why would you ever buy the $200 ungraded one when you can get the PSA 10, $200? I see that with the Players a bit. This is up a little too high for me to buy as much as I would. And that's the thing about AP ratio. It's not always either or. This is a good example of that. It's somewhere in the middle. Now, I'll definitely buy Players promos now and again, but if you go back to some of my old Patreon videos, like maybe 2 years ago, I'm like, yep, bought Players Club this month, bought some more Players Club this month, because they were so undervalued. It was like this. Like, I could go buy mint, ungraded Players Club instantly grade them and they're like this. You have that good margin there, where now it's closer, like you've highlighted. So if you don't hit that 9 to 10, you took a bath, or it's a wash. So yeah, very good question. Kind of similar to some of the other questions about the AP ratio. So it's just another example of availability price ratios that you can have. Some that are like obvious, like the $200 Gold Star ones. You can have some that are subtle like this. You can have some that are like the WotC 9s, from 2017. It's just a way to ascertain value, and I agree. That's my explanation. Hopefully that gives you a better understanding. All right, last page. I think we got all 50 of them here. This is the last page. How long is this video right now? I don't even know. When I do Q&As, I'm like in the hyperbaric time frame. I have no sense of what time it is anymore. I just love doing Q&As so much. I don't even I don't even know. When did I start? There's a clock down here. I don't even remember. Anyway, moving along. Andrew Hart says, "Hey Scott, I'm wondering which Japanese black and white boxes you think will be the most sought after in the future. I know they're hard to find, but wondering your thoughts. Also, I recently saw how low pop Japanese DP hollow sets are. I'm wondering if you are one of the few to actually have them PS10. Cheers." Yeah, I think I have some DP stuff. It's probably I have a lot of stuff in storage I don't even look at. But yeah, as for black and white boxes, what's that one? Next Destinies with Mewtwo. That one comes to mind. Dragon's Exalted, maybe. It's, to me, a lot of these just blur together. I'll be honest with you. I'm outside of things like emerging powers. A lot of them blur together. The problem with this stuff, I see it with other questions here. There's a little bit of force. People trying to force things to happen before they are. And Diamond and Pearl is one of those that when it happens, it'll happen. Why the pop is low is because the popularity is low. That's just what it is. Like, Diamond and Pearl is wholesale, by far, the least interesting era in the hobby. I'm sorry if that's the era you grew up with. I'm talking like what they did creatively for the cards, what the pull rates were like for cards, what you get from a pack, all of it, top to bottom, it's like when they stopped using the Concorde jet. It's one of the rare moments in history we took a step back in technology. We lost, supersonic flight. That's how that was. EX era with Gold Stars, EX cards to Diamond and Pearl was objectively a step backwards. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you, because like a lot of people I think want that to stonk or do better, but it's just that organically there's not as much interest. Will that change over time? Sure. I think the rising tide lifting all boats trend can pull that up. I think if everything else keeps going up or goes up or whatever, people will be like, oh, well, this Diamond and Pearl box, Secret Wonders, there it is. That's the one I was trying to think of earlier with Ho-Oh and Blastoise. Anyway, if that comes up in value, because the other stuff is going so high, people will look to that and be like, oh, well, I can open this and, pull a Blastoise or Charizard or Ho-Oh or whatever, Lugia, and at a fraction of the price. Yeah, maybe they'll make it more attractive, but you got to understand, everybody and their dog now is in the game, and DP is still not stonking that hard. It's because it just wasn't organically that popular. So, yeah, that's what I can tell you. As far as top black and white boxes, a lot of them blur together. Lance says, what do you think about PSA 10 Gold Stars as pieces to park my money, both English and Japanese? I'll just say, you asked what I think about PSA 10 Gold Stars. That's what I'm going to say. Where you want to park your money, that's up to you. I'm not your financial advisor, so that's more of a personal choice on your end. So PSA 10 Gold Stars, English, they're definitely the thing that people go for. Like, PSA 9, I think, has a better value right now in relation to cost basis. Like, if I'm going to use my capital to buy the card I want, PSA 9 and even 8, I think, are a better value for cost basis. But for money, yeah, I can see PSA 10s for some. The problem you got to understand with Gold Stars is they're so popular. They don't hear this as a negative. They are one of the best, if not the best, chase cards ever made in the hobby. But they're just very basic. It's almost like sealed product to me is also in that same vein. It's so boring. Everybody does it. Like if someone says like what WotC boxes should I buy? Even like the earlier question about what black and white boxes. It's like, dude, like, just buy a box and wait. Like, that's all anybody could say. Like, you shouldn't stress about. You could buy base set 2 from WotC right now. Just wait 5 years. Like, if you're not willing to wait 5 years, then you're not. I don't know what to say, because that's what the name of the game is. But yeah, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, Japanese is rarer than English in general. Doesn't have as much demand. I think that's pretty much all I could say. But yeah, PSA Gold Star is good. Good cards, okay. They're staple cards. A lot of people buy them. Yeah, moving on to the last question. Peanut says, "Hey Scott, it's me, Peanut, back again with another story. Got 2 questions for you. 25th anniversary stuff. Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely loving it. Really looking forward to it. Both English and Japanese. I'm hoping to get my snotty hands on some. This is perhaps directed more towards English. About how much do they think they're going to print? Looking at how things like Gold Star, Ninjas are going to be a handout via promo card rather than a chase. What do you feel about this in general and long term? I feel like they really takes away the thrill and awesomeness of what makes a Gold Star in terms of star and value. That being said, I still feel like knocking out of the park and stopped me from wanting things like Gold Star Ninja. Also, if buying raw and graded cards is fishing with an old rod. Wow, you said it, remembered. Fishing with an old rod, as you always say, then what is the good rod and the super rod for? Buying straight crack, slabs. Thank you for the education, insight, and all you do. I look forward to them. Lots of love, Peanut. Yeah, I guess the super ultra rod is just a more refined search. Maybe that's the analogy. But yeah, as for 25th anniversary and the idea of like releasing Greninja differently, I could see both sides. I mean, Umbreon and Espeon are pop cards, from pop packs. I think those, I don't know exactly. Let me reread this before I slam it down to the ground. Okay, if it's going to be a handout, yeah, I don't know how I feel about a handout. I think it'd be better like doing a pop pack type thing. Honestly, I love how the Umbreon and Espeon aren't weighable. So that means you got to rip those packs. I've got a stack of like pop 5 packs I don't touch because I'm like, even if there's a Gold Star in there, I don't want to rip 30, 40 packs to get to one Gold Star, So, because I've already done it. Like I've already pulled both of those from packs. So anyway, my point is that, yeah, if they did it that way, I think it'd be fine. I don't know. It's tough with the handout. That's kind of unprecedented. We've never had a Gold Star handed out before. But yeah, overall, I think it's very exciting. I wouldn't get hung up on that. As for supply, we don't know supply yet of 25th anniversary. All I know from my distributors is that they expect it to be allocated like everything else. Our data and history can tell us that if EV Heroes was heavily allocated, and EV Heroes is a good set, but 25th anniversary makes EV Heroes look like dog water. Like 25th anniversary so far just seems like a dream come true. It has so much going on in it. So yeah, I'd expect the same thing. Who knows? No one can tell you what English is going to look like. I would imagine from what's going on now, English is getting more print. I'm still waiting to get an EV Heroes second wave. I still don't have it. The second I hear it from my distributor, I'll let you guys know, but I'm still sitting, waiting, just twiddling my thumbs, waiting for them to tell me when am I going to get my second batch of EV Heroes. So yeah, that's what I have. This was the first Q&A out of 2. So this is the first 50 questions. I'll do the next 50 in a separate video. I think most of them have been asked at this point, but if not, you could always type them, but I'll just go ahead and after Peanut, whoever's next in line, I'll go down and take those next 50, Control-C, Control-V, be back here in about 10 days, a couple weeks, somewhere in there. But you know the deal. Let me know how you feel, and that's pretty much it, guys. Got to thank you as always. You're all the reasons. I'm going to keep doing Patreon as much as I can. I really like doing this. It's so fun doing the Q&As. It's just, I love reading the questions, love talking about the hobby, love learning from you. Hopefully you learned something from me as well. So yeah, hopefully it's good. Thank you again. Talk to you guys in a couple weeks. Until next time.